performing arts have now enjoyed the professional services of George Orson Welles for 35 years, ever since 1931, when he arrived at the Gate Theatre in Dublin, passed himself off as a well-known actor from the New York Theatre Guild, and began playing leads at the age of 16. The previous year, just before graduating from a progressive boys' school in Woodstock, Illinois, he had put an ad in an American trade paper. It read, in part,
"Stock, characters, heavies, juveniles, or as cast. Lots of pep, experience, and ability."
Already George Welles had begun to behave as if he were Orson Welles. The milestones of Welles's career are dotted all over the landscape of show business in the middle decades of the 20th century. He had only to train his sights on an art for it to capitulate. Theatre fell first. Just 30 years ago, he directed a famous all-Negro Macbeth in Harlem. Moving downtown, he launched the Mercury Theatre with his modern dress production of Julius Caesar, in which Caesar was a bald-pated replica of Mussolini. Almost in passing, he conquered radio. Blood froze all over America when he celebrated Halloween in 1938 with a broadcast version of H.G. Wells's War of the Worlds.
The Columbia Broadcasting System and its affiliated stations present Orson Welles and the Mercury Theatre on the air in The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. Ladies and gentlemen, the director of the Mercury Theatre and star of these broadcasts, Orson Welles.
We know now that in the early years of the 20th century, this world was being watched closely by intelligences greater than man's, and yet as mortal as his own. We know now that as human beings busied themselves about their various concerns, they were scrutinized and studied, perhaps almost as narrowly as a man with a microscope might scrutinize the transient creatures that swarm and multiply in a drop of water. With infinite complacence, people went to and fro over the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over this small, spinning fragment of solar driftwood, which by chance or design, man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space. Yet across an immense ethereal gulf, minds that are to our minds as ours are to the beasts in the jungle, intellects, vast, cool, and unsympathetic, regarded this earth with envious eyes and slowly and surely drew their plans against us.
The movie industry was the next to surrender. A quarter of a century has passed since the premiere of Citizen Kane, Welles's first film, but Hollywood seismographs still record the tremors left by its impact. It gave the American cinema an adult vocabulary, and in a recent poll of international critics, it was voted the finest film ever made. The Magnificent Ambersons, which followed in 1942, confirmed the arrival of a revolutionary virtuoso. In every art he touched, Welles started at the top. That was his triumph, and also his problem. Whenever his name appeared on anything less than a masterpiece, people instantly said he was slipping. During the past 20 years, living mainly in Europe, Welles has been a rogue elephant at large in most of the performing media. He may turn up in Morocco, filming Othello on a frayed shoestring, in London, directing his own brilliant stage adaptation of Moby Dick, in Paris, shooting Kafka's The Trial in a derelict railway station, in Spain, making a still unfinished movie of Don Quixote, in Yugoslavia or Italy, hamming away for money in other people's bad epics, and even in Hollywood, where in 1958 he made a startling and underrated thriller called Touch of Evil. You can never tell how or where he will manifest himself next. In the course of his career, apart from writing and directing films and plays and acting in both, he has been a novelist, a painter, a ballet scenarist, a conjurer, a columnist, a television pundit, and an amateur bullfighter. There's symbolic, if not literal, truth in the story about how he once addressed a thinly attended meeting of admirers with the words,
"Isn't it a shame that there are so many of me and so few of you?"
He has grown fat, spreading himself thin. A passive figure sculpted in foam rubber, he is preceded wherever he goes by his belly and an oversized cigar, and his presence is immediately signaled, even to the blind, by the Bacchic earthquake of his laughter. His first European base was a villa near Rome, but nowadays he lives with his Italian wife and their daughter, Beatrice, in an expensive suburb of Madrid.
"I used to be an American emigre in Italy,"
he says.
"Now I'm an Italian exile in Spain."
At 51, he has long since joined the select group of international celebrities whose fame is self-sustaining, no matter how widely opinions of their work may vary, and no matter how much the work itself may fluctuate in quality. Other members of the club in recent times have been Chaplin, Ellington, Cocteau, Picasso, and Hemingway. My interview with him took place last spring in London. Welles was appearing with Peter Sellers and David Niven in Casino Royale, the James Bond film that has everything but Sean Connery.
Bond. James Bond.
Characteristically, Welles had insisted on living in a furnished apartment directly over the Mirabelle, one of the most expensive and arguably the best restaurants in London. Thus, he could be sure of gourmet room service. Empty caviar pots adorned every table. Imposingly swathed in the robes of a Buddhist priest, he sipped Dom Perignon champagne and talked far into the night. Later, at his hotel, he talked with me about his next production, Treasure Island, in which he would play Long John Silver. Then he would complete Don Quixote and make a film of King Lear. After that, there were plenty of other projects in hand.
The bee
He said happily.
is always making honey.
You've been a celebrity now for 30 years, Orson. In all that time, what's the most accurate description anyone has given of you?
I don't want any description of me to be accurate, Ken. I want it to be flattering. I don't think people who have to sing for their supper ever like to be described truthfully. Not in print, anyway. We need to sell tickets, so we need good reviews.
In private conversation, what's the pleasantest thing you ever heard about yourself?
Roosevelt saying that I would have been a great politician. Barrymore saying that Chaplin and myself were the two finest living actors. I don't mean that I believe those things, but you use the word pleasant. What I really enjoy is flattery in the suburbs of my work, about things I'm not mainly or even professionally occupied with. When an old bullfighter tells me I'm one of the few people who understand the bulls, or when a magician says I'm a good magician, that tickles the ego without having anything to do with the box office.
Of all the comments, written or spoken, that have been made about you, which has displeased you the most?
Well, nothing spoken. It's only written things I mind. For example, everything Walter Kerr ever wrote about me. It takes a big effort for me to persuade myself that anything bad I read about myself isn't true. I have a primitive respect for the printed word as it applies to me, especially if it's negative. I can remember being described in Denver, when I was playing March Banks in Candida at the age of 18, as a sea cow whining in a basso profundo. That was more than 30 years ago, and I can still quote the review verbatim. I can never remember the good ones. Probably the bad ones hurt so much and so morbidly because I've run the store so long. I've been an actor-manager in radio, films, and the theater, and in a very immediate way, I've been economically dependent on what's written about me, so that I worry about how much it's going to affect the gross. Or maybe that's just a justification for hypersensitivity.
Talking about critics, you once complained, "They don't review my work, they review me." Do you feel that's still true?
Oh, yes, but I suppose I shouldn't kick about it. I earn a good living and get a lot of work because of this ridiculous myth about me. But the price of it is that when I try to do something serious, something I care about, a great many critics don't review that particular work, but me in general. They write their standard Welles piece. It's either the good piece or the bad piece, but they're both fairly standard.
In an era of increasing specialization, you've expressed yourself in almost every artistic medium. Have you never wanted to specialize?
No, I can't imagine limiting myself. It's a great shame that we live in an age of specialists, and I think we give them too much respect. I've known 4 or 5 great doctors in my life, and they have always told me that medicine is still in a primitive state and that they know hardly anything about it. I've known only one great cameraman, Greg Toland, who photographed Citizen Kane. He said he could teach me everything about the camera in 4 hours, and he did.
Since World War II, you've lived and worked mostly outside the United States. Would you call yourself an expatriate?
Well, I don't like that word, really, since childhood. I've always regarded myself as an American who happens to live all over the place. Expatriate is a dated word that relates to a particular 1920-ish generation and to a romantic attitude about living abroad. I'm prejudiced against the word rather than the fact. I might very well cease to be an American citizen someday, but simply because, if you're forming a production company in Europe, it's economically helpful to be a European. I'm not young enough to bear arms for my country, so why shouldn't I live where I like and where I get the most work? After all, London is full of Hungarians and Germans and Frenchmen, and America is full of everybody, and they aren't called expatriates.
Look out the window. Look!
Well, that's an old trick, Mr. Wilson, a very poor trick.
Tricks. That's all you know is tricks. I don't need any tricks. No matter what happens to me, tricks won't do you any good. You're finished, Herr Franz Kindler. Citizens of Harper, They've come after you. The plain little ordinary people, the ones you've been laughing at, Herr Franz Kindler. Well, you can't fool them anymore. Oh, sure, you can kill me, Mary, half the people down there. There's no escape. You'd have the world and it closed in on you till there was only half of it. That closed in on you and there was only this room. And this room, too, is closing in on you.
It's not true, the things they say I did. It's all their idea. I followed orders.
You gave the orders.
I only did my duty. Don't send me back to them. I can't face them. I'm not a criminal.
You are.
If you could have picked any country and period in which to be born, would you have chosen America in 1915?
It wouldn't have been all that low on my list, but anyone in their senses would have wanted to live in the golden age of Greece, in 15th century Italy, or Elizabethan England. And there were other golden ages. Persia had one, and China had 4 or 5. Ours is an extraordinary age, but it doesn't even look very silver to me. I think I might have been happier and more fulfilled in other periods and places, including America at about the time when we started putting up roofs instead of tents.
Are there any figures in American history you identify with?
Like most Americans, I wish I had some Lincoln in me, but I don't. I can't imagine myself being capable of any such goodness or compassion. I guess the only great American whose role I might conceivably have occupied is Tom Paine. He was a radical, a true independent, not in the comfortable present-day liberal sense, but in the good, tough sense that he was prepared to go to jail for it. It's been my luck, good or bad, not to have been faced with that choice.
Your parents separated when you were 6, but you travelled widely with your mother, who died 2 years later. You then went around the world with your father, who died when you were 15. What places do you remember most vividly from this early globe-trotting period?
Berlin had about 3 good years from 1926 onward, and so did Chicago about the same time. But the best cities were certainly Budapest and Peking. They had the best talk and the most action right up to the end. But I can't forget a party I attended somewhere in the Tyrol, sometime in the mid-20s. I was on a walking tour with several other little boys, and our tutor took us to eat at a big open-air beer garden. We sat at a long table with a lot of Nazis, who were then a little-known bunch of cranks, and I was placed next to a small man with a very dim personality. He made no impression on me at the time, but later, when I saw his pictures, I realized that I had lunched with Adolf Hitler.
In many of the films you've written and directed, the hero has no father. We know nothing about Citizen Kane's father, and George, in The Magnificent Ambersons, ruins the life of his widowed mother by forbidding her to remarry. In your latest film, Falstaff, the hero is Prince Hal, whose legitimate father, Henry IV of England, is a murderous usurper, but his spiritual father, whom you play yourself,
Is Falstaff.
Right. Does this attitude toward fathers reflect anything in your own life?
I don't think so. I had a father whom I remember as enormously likable and attractive. He was a gambler and a playboy who may have been getting a bit old for it when I knew him, but he was a marvelous fellow, and it was a great sorrow to me when he died. No, a story interests me on its own merits, not because it's autobiographical. The Falstaff story is the best in Shakespeare, not the best play, but the best story. The richness of the triangle between the father and Falstaff and the son is without parallel. It's a complete Shakespearean creation. The other plays are good stories borrowed from other sources and made great because of what Shakespeare breathed into them. But there's nothing in the medieval chronicles that even hints at the Falstaff-Hal King story. That's Shakespeare's story, and Falstaff is entirely his creation. He's the only great character in dramatic literature who is also good.
Do you agree with W.H. Auden, who once likened him to a Christ figure?
I won't argue with that, Ken, although my flesh always creeps when people use the word Christ. I think Falstaff is like a Christmas tree decorated with vices. The tree itself is total innocence and love. By contrast, the king is decorated only with kingliness. He's a pure Machiavellian. And there's something beady-eyed and self-regarding about his son, even when he reaches his apotheosis as Henry V.
Do you think Falstaff is likely to outrage Shakespeare lovers?
Well, I've always edited Shakespeare, and my other Shakespearean films have suffered critically for just that reason. God knows what will happen with this one. In the case of Macbeth or Othello, I tried to make a single play into a film script. In Falstaff, I've taken 5 plays: Richard II, the 2 parts of Henry IV, Henry V, and The Merry Wives of Windsor, and turned them into an entertainment lasting less than 2 hours. Naturally, I'm going to offend the kind of Shakespeare lover whose main concern is the sacredness of the text. But with people who are willing to concede that movies are a separate art form, I have some hopes of success. After all, when Verdi wrote Falstaff and Othello, nobody criticized him for radically changing Shakespeare. Larry Olivier has made fine Shakespearean movies that are essentially filmed Shakespearean plays. I use Shakespeare's words and characters to make motion pictures. They are variations on his themes. In Falstaff, I've gone much further than ever before, but not willfully, not for the fun of chopping and dabbling. If you see the history plays night after night in the theater, you discover a continuing story about a delinquent prince who turns into a great military captain, a usurping king, and Falstaff, the prince's spiritual father, who is a kind of secular saint. It finally culminates in the rejection of Falstaff by the prince. My film is entirely true to that story, although it sacrifices great parts of the plays from which the story is mined.
Does the film have a message, Orson?
It laments the death of chivalry and the rejection of merry England. Even in Shakespeare's day, the old England of the greenwood and Maytime was already a myth, but a very real one. The rejection of Falstaff by the prince means the rejection of that England by a new kind of England that Shakespeare deplored, an England that ended up as the British Empire. The main change is no excuse for the betrayal of a friendship. It's the liberation of that story that justifies my surgical approach to the text.
May we check on a few of the popular rumors about you? It's been said that your pictures always go over the budget. True or false?
False. I'm not an overspender, though I've sometimes been a delayed earner. Citizen Kane, for instance, cost about $850,000. I've no idea how much profit it's made by now, but it must be plenty. That profit took time, and it didn't go to me. All the pictures I've directed have been made within their budgets. The only exception was a documentary about South America that I started in 1942, just after I finished shooting The Magnificent Ambersons. I was asked to do it by the government for no salary, but with $1 million to spend. But it was the studio's money, not the government's, and the studio fired me when I'd spent $600,000 on the basis that I was throwing money away. This is when the legend started. The studio spent a lot of dough and a lot of manpower putting it into circulation.
A good deal of space and veneration is lavished on you in such avant-garde movie interviews as Cahiers du Cinéma. What do you think of the new wave French directors so admired by these journals?
I'm longing to see their work. I've missed most of it because I'm afraid it might inhibit my own. When I make a picture, I don't like it to refer to other pictures. I like to think I'm inventing everything for the first time. I talk to Cahiers du Cinéma about movies in general because I'm so pleased that they like mine. When they want long, highbrow interviews, I haven't the heart to refuse them. But it's a complete act. I'm a fraud. I even talk about the art of the cinema. I wouldn't talk to my friends about the art of the cinema. I'd rather be caught without my pants in the middle of Times Square.
How do you feel about the films of Antonioni?
According to a young American critic, one of the great discoveries of our age is the value of boredom as an artistic subject. If that is so, Antonioni deserves to be counted as a pioneer and founding father. His movies are perfect backgrounds for fashion models. Maybe there aren't backgrounds that good in Vogue, but 3 ought to be. They ought to get Antonioni to design them.
And what about Fellini?
He's as gifted as anyone making pictures today. His limitation, which is also the source of his charm, is that he's fundamentally very provincial. His films are a small-town boy's dream of the big city. His sophistication works because it's the creation of someone who doesn't have it. But he shows dangerous signs of being a superlative artist with little to say.
Ingmar Bergman?
As I suggested a while ago, I share neither his interests nor his obsessions. He's far more foreign to me than the Japanese.
How about contemporary American directors?
Stanley Kubrick and Richard Lester are the only ones that appeal to me, except for the old masters, by which I mean John Ford, and John Ford. With Ford at his best, you feel that the movie has lived and breathed in a real world, even though it may have been written by Mother Machree. I don't regard Alfred Hitchcock as an American director, though he's worked in Hollywood for all these years. He seems to me tremendously English, in the best Edgar Wallace tradition, and no more. There's always something anecdotal about his work. His contrivances remain contrivances, no matter how marvelously they're conceived and executed. I don't honestly believe that Hitchcock is a director whose pictures will be of any interest 100 years from now. With Hitchcock, it's a world of spooks.
When you first went to Hollywood in 1940, the big studios were still omnipotent. Do you think you'd have fared better if you'd arrived 20 years later in the era of independent productions?
The very opposite. Hollywood died on me as soon as I got there. I wish to God I'd gone there sooner. It was the rise of the independents that was my ruin as a director. The old studio bosses, Jack Warner, Sam Goldwyn, Darryl Zanuck, Harry Cohn, were all friends, or friendly enemies I knew how to deal with. They all offered me work. Louis B. Mayer even wanted me to be the production chief of his studio, the job Dory Sherry took. I was in great shape with those boys. The minute the independents got in, I never directed another American picture except by accident. If I'd gone to Hollywood in the last 5 years, virgin and unknown, I could have written my own ticket. But I'm not a virgin. I drag my myth around with me, and I've had much more trouble with the independents than I ever had with the big studios. I was a maverick, but the studios understood what that meant, and if there was a fight, we both enjoyed it. With an annual output of 40 pictures per studio, there would probably be room for one Orson Welles picture. But an independent is a fellow whose work is centered around his own particular gifts. In that setup, there's no place for me.
What's my fortune? You've been reading the cards, haven't you?
I've been doing the accounts.
Come on, read my future for me.
You haven't got any.
What do you mean?
Your future is all used up. Why don't you go home?
Looking back on your career in the performing arts, do you ever regret that you didn't go into politics?
Sometimes very bitterly. There was a time when I considered running as a junior senator from Wisconsin. My opponent would have been a fellow called Joe McCarthy. If you feel that you might have been useful and effective in public office, you can't help being disappointed in yourself for never having tried it. And I flatter myself that I might have been. I think I am, at least potentially, a better public speaker than an actor, and I might have been able to reach people, to move and convince them. Oratory today is an almost non-existent art, but if we lived in a society where rhetoric was seriously considered as an art, as it has been at many periods in world history, then I would have been an orator.
What are your politics, and have they changed in the last 25 years?
Everyone's politics have changed in the last 25 years. You can't have a political opinion in a vacuum. It has to be a reaction to a situation. I've always been an independent radical, but with wide streaks of emotional and cultural old-fashionedness. I have enormous respect for many human institutions that are now in serious decay and likely never to be revived. Although I'm what is called a progressive, it isn't out of dislike for the past. I don't reject our yesterdays. I wish that parts of our dead past were more alive. If I'm capable of originality, it's not because I want to knock down idols or be ahead of the times. If there's anything rigid about me, it's a distaste for being in vogue. I would much rather be thought old-fashioned than with it. But in general, I still belong to the liberal leftist world as it exists in the West. I vote that way and stand with those people. We may disagree on one issue or another, but that is where I belong.
You've met many of the great men and women of your time. Is there any living person you'd still like to meet?
Mrs. Sukarno, for obvious reasons, and Chou En-lai, mostly out of curiosity. I don't know if he'd be as interesting now as I always heard he used to be. He might be old and stiff and sad. I wish I'd known George Marshall, Winston Churchill, and Wilson Meisner, an early 20th century American playwright, better than I did. I never knew Pope John, and that's a real regret. And although it may sound a little demagogic, I'd love to talk to an old lady named Elizabeth Allen. She's English. She's been living in a tin hut in a forest for about 80 years, and she makes the most beautiful pictures you ever saw out of rags. She's just had her first exhibition in London, and she is superlative. But above everybody else, I'd like to meet Robert Graves, not only because I think he's the greatest living poet, but because he has given me through the years the kind of pleasure that you get from close friends. I'd like to have some more of that stuff, only firsthand.
Is there anyone, living or dead, with whom you'd like to change places?
If you've had as much luck as I have, it would be sort of treachery to want to be anyone but yourself.
What is your major vice?
Assidia, the medieval Latin word for melancholy, and sloth. I don't give way to it for long, but it still comes lurching at me out of the shadows. I have most of the accepted sins, envy perhaps the least of all, and pride. I'm not sure that is a sin. It's the only place where I quarrel with the Christian list. If it's a virtue, I don't recognize much of it in myself. The same is true if it's a vice.
Do you consider gluttony a bad vice?
All vice is bad. A lot of vices are secret, but not gluttony. It shows. It certainly shows on me. But I feel that gluttony must be a good deal less deadly than some of the other sins, because it's affirmative, isn't it? At least it celebrates some of the good things of life. Gluttony may be a sin, but an awful lot of fun goes into committing it. On the other hand, it's wrong for a man to make a mess of himself. I'm fat, and people shouldn't be fat.
If the decision were yours, would you censor anything in films or the theatre?
I am so opposed to censorship that I must answer no, nothing. But if there were no censorship, I have a little list of the things I would prefer not to have shown. Not too often, anyway. Heavy spice isn't good for the palate, and in the theater and films, when there's too much license, what is merely raw tends to crowd out almost everything else, and our dramatic vocabulary is impoverished. If you show the act of copulation every time you do a love scene, both the producers and the public get to feel that no other kind of love scene is worth doing, and that the only variations on the theme are variations of physical position. No, artists should not be censored, but I do think they should restrain themselves in order not to weaken the language of their art. Take the old Roman comedies. Once you bring out those great leather phalluses, you get so there isn't any other sort of joke you can do. It's the same with violence, or any theatrical extreme. If it's pushed too far, it tends to erode the middle register of human feeling. However, propaganda against any kind of loving human relationship is despicable and probably ought to be censored.
But how do you reconcile that with...
For 30 years, people have been asking me how I reconcile X with Y. The truthful answer is that I don't. Everything about me is a contradiction, and so is everything about everybody I know. We are made out of oppositions. We live between two poles. There's a Philistine and an aesthete in all of us, and a murderer and a saint. You don't reconcile the poles. You just recognize them.
Did you have a religious upbringing?
Quite the contrary. My mother was born a Catholic, but then became a student of Oriental religions, in which she later lost interest. She taught me to read the Bible as a wonderful piece of literature. My father was a total agnostic, and Dr. Bernstein, the guardian who looked after me when my parents died, always made fun of the Bible stories. That shocked me as a child. I have a natural sense of veneration for what man has aspired to beyond himself, in East or West. It comes easily and instinctively to me to feel reverence rather than a gleeful skepticism. I read the mystics, though I'm not a mystic myself.
Do you believe in God?
My feelings on that subject are a constant interior dialogue that I haven't sufficiently resolved to be sure that I have anything worth communicating to people I don't know. I may not be a believer, but I'm certainly religious. In a strange way, I even accept the divinity of Christ. The accumulation of faith creates its own veracity. It does this in a sort of Jungian sense, because it's been made true in a way that's almost as real as life. If you ask me whether the rabbi who was crucified was God, the answer is no. But the great irresistible thing about the Judeo-Christian idea is that man, no matter what his ancestry, no matter how close he is to any murderous ape, really is unique. If we are capable of unselfishly loving one another, we are absolutely alone as a species on this planet. There isn't another animal that remotely resembles us. The notion of Christ's divinity is a way of saying that. That's why the myth is true. In the highest tragic sense, it dramatizes the idea that man is divine.
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God.
I am He.
He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was made nothing that has been made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shines on in the darkness, and the darkness grasped it not. The greatest story ever told.
Does your idealization of man apply equally to woman? Are there any limitations on what a woman can achieve?
No, there's a limitation on what she is likely to do, but not on what she can do. Women have managed to do everything, but the likelihood that they're going to do it often is statistically small. It's improbable that they will ever be as numerous as men in the arts. I believe that if there had never been men, there would never have been art, but if there had never been women, men would never have made art.
The look of love is in your eyes, a look your smile can't disguise. The look of love, it's saying so much more than just words could ever say. And what my heart has heard, well, it takes my breath away. I can hardly wait to hold you, feel my arms around you. How long I have waited just to love you. Now that I've found you, you've got the look of love. It's on your face, the look that time can't erase.
Whom would you choose as a model of the way men ought to behave toward women?
Robert Graves. In other words, total adoration. Mine is less total than it ought to be. I'm crazy about the girls, but I do like to sit around the port with the boys. I recognize in myself that old-fashioned Edwardian tendency, shared by many other societies in other epochs, to let the ladies leave us for a while after dinner, so the men can talk. We'll join them later. I've talked endlessly to women for sexual purposes. Years of my life have been given up to it. But women usually depress or dominate a conversation to its detriment, though of course there are brilliant and unnerving exceptions. In a sense, every woman is an exception. It's the generality that makes a male chauvinist like me.
The Vikings in Europe of the 8th and 9th century were dedicated to a pagan god of war, Odin. Cramped by the confines of their barren icebound northlands,
They exploited their skill as shipbuilders to spread a reign of terror then unequaled in violence and brutality in all the records of history. The greatest wish of every Viking was to die sword in hand and enter Valhalla, where a hero's welcome awaited them from the god Odin. The compass was unknown, and they could steer only by the sun and the stars. Once fog closed in, they were left helpless and blind. After all, the earth was flat, sail too far off course, and the black wind would blow them across the poison sea that lay to the west and over the edge of the world into limbo. Their abiding aim was to conquer England, then a series of petty kingdoms, each one the jealous rival of the next. Thus, when the Vikings set forth to rob and plunder England, they never sailed out of sight of land. They confined their attacks to swift overnight raids. It was no accident that the English Book of Prayer contained this sentence: "Protect us, O Lord, from the wrath of the Northmen."
If art is an expression of protest, as some philosophers have felt, do you think it's possible that in an automated world of abundance, devoid of frustrations and pressures, nobody would feel compelled to create art?
I don't believe that even in a perfect oyster show, there will never be another grain of sand, and therefore never another pearl. And I don't accept that art is necessarily based on unhappiness. It's often serene and joyous and a kind of celebration. That isn't to deny the vast body of work that has been created in conditions of spiritual and economic wretchedness and even torment, but I see no reason to think that culture will be poorer because people are happier.
Some critics assert that modern art can be produced by accident, as in action painting, aleatory music, and theatrical happenings. Do you think it's possible to create a work of art without intending to?
Categorically, no. You may create something that will give some of the pleasures and emotions that a work of art may give, just as a microscopic study of a snowflake or a tapeworm or a cancer cell may be a beautiful object. But a work of art is a conscious human effort that has to do with communication. It is that or it is nothing. When an accident is applauded as a work of art, when a cult grows up around the deliciousness of inadvertent beauty, we are in the presence of the greatest decadence the West has known in its history.
Do you agree with those modern artists who say, "I don't care what happens to my work tomorrow, it's only meant for today"?
No, because an artist shouldn't care what happens today either. To care about today to the exclusion of any other time, to be self-consciously contemporary, is to be absurdly parochial. That's what is wrong about the artist association with the huckster. Today has been canonized, beatified. But today is just one day in the history of our planet. It's the be-all and the end-all only for somebody who is selling something.
You opposed me in the council this morning, Thomas.
Yes, Your Grace.
You were the only one.
Yes, Your Grace.
You're a fool.
Thank God there is only one fool on the council.
Why did you oppose me?
I thought Your Grace was wrong.
Matter of conscience. You're a constant regret to me, Thomas. If you could just see facts flat on without that horrible moral squint, a little common sense, you could have made a statesman. King. Where has he been? You know?
Aye, Your Grace.
Oh, spare me your discretion. He's been to play in the muck again. Oh, he's been to Mistress Anne Boleyn. More. Are you going to help me?
If Your Grace will be specific.
Ah, you're a plodder. All right, we'll plod. The king wants a son. What are you going to do about it?
I'm very sure the king needs no advice from me on what to do about it.
Thomas, we're alone. I give you my word, there's no one here.
I didn't suppose there was, Your Grace.
Oh. And do you favor a change of dynasty, Sir Thomas? Do you think 2 Tudors are sufficient?
For God's sake, Your
When
Grace.
he needs a son, I repeat, what are you going to do about it?
I pray for it daily.
Constance, he means it. That thing out there, at least she's fertile.
She's not his wife.
No, Catherine's his wife, and she's barren as a brick. Are you going to pray for a miracle?
There are precedents.
Yes. All right, good. Pray. Pray by all means. But in addition to prayer, there is effort. And my efforts to secure a divorce. Have I your support or have I not?
The Pope gave a dispensation so that the king might marry his brother's widow for state reasons. Now we are to ask the Pope to dispense with his dispensation, also for state reasons.
I don't like plodding, Thomas. Well,
Then clearly all we have to do is to approach His Holiness and ask him.
oh, I think we might influence the decision of His Holiness.
By argument?
Oh, argument, certainly, and pressure.
Pressure. Applied to the church. Church houses, church property.
Pressure.
No, Your Grace. I'm not going to help you.
Then good night, Master Moore. Let the dynasty die with Henry VIII and we'll have dynastic wars again. Blood-witted barons ramping the country from end to end. Is that what you want? Very well. England needs an heir. Certain measures, perhaps regrettable, perhaps not. There's much in the church which needs reformation, Thomas. All right, regrettable, but necessary to get us an heir. Now, explain how you, as a Councillor of England, can obstruct these measures for the sake of your own private conscience.
Well, I think that when statesmen forsake their own private conscience for the sake of their public duties, they lead their country by a short route to chaos. And we shall have my prayers to fall back on.
You'd like that, wouldn't you? To govern the country with prayers.
Yes, I should.
I'd like to be there when you try. Who will wear this after me? Who's our next Chancellor? You? Fisher? Suffolk?
Fisher for me.
Aye, but for the king. What about my secretary, Master Cromwell?
Cromwell. He's a very able man.
But?
Me, rather than Cromwell.
Then come down to earth. Till you do, you and I are enemies.
As your grace wishes.
As God wills.
Perhaps, your grace.
More. You should have been a cleric.
Like yourself, your grace?
Have you any theories about what will happen to you after death?
I don't know about my soul, but my body will be sent to the White House. American passports ask you to state the name and address of the person to whom your remains should be delivered in the event of your death. I discovered many years ago that there is no law against putting down the name and address of the president. This has a powerful effect on the borders of many countries and acts as a sort of diplomatic visa. During the long Eisenhower years, I would almost have been willing to die in order to have my coffin turn up some evening in front of his television set.
How would you like the world to remember you?
I've set myself against being concerned with any more worldly success than I need to function. That's an honest statement and not a piece of attitudinizing. Up to a point, I have to be successful in order to operate. But I think it's corrupting to care about success, and nothing could be more vulgar than to worry about posterity.
Thank you.
You're welcome.